Welcome to Finally I Choose Me, where purpose meets authenticity. So I'm so excited about tonight's conversation. I was just kind of laying around one day, and God was like, bring your kids on. Let's talk to your kids. No longer kids, but adult children. And I've had a lot of conversations with parents who are making the transition of, how do I, who once parented children, now transition and choose myself and allow them to be adults without interference. But also, several years ago, I'm a fan of Ayanna Van Zant. And one of the things she said was she didn't realize what type of parent she was until her oldest daughter died. And one of the things that the oldest daughter mentioned was that her mother was extremely mean, not available, emotionally disconnected, but yet she was fixing the lives of so many other people. And my prayer had always been to not let me be so consumed with the world, with the helping profession, that I forget about my family, especially my children who are now adults. And I'm excited to introduce, I know the world already know who you guys are because, hey, they say your kids are special. Your kids are great. So I kind of, reminiscing that. But as a parent, um, things haven't always been perfect. So I bring to the community today in this conversation my oldest, Mr. Mac Lawson, uh, and Lady J, Justice Easton, and I'll let them kind of introduce themselves and we're going to get into the conversation wherever God leads us, whatever comes up, we just going to flow. Mike?
All right.
Cool. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, how y'all doing, everybody? My name is Michael Mac Lawson, actor, singer, author, all of those things. And yeah, I'm excited to be here today, and I'm excited for the conversation. I'm hoping that we can inspire some people and spread some love, some light, and some insight on things. And it's an honor to support my mother on my podcast, but just to be an example of what love and a family can do. So, yeah.
Amen.
Hello, everyone. My name is Justice, also known as Lady J. In October, will be 2 years of me being in the mortgage industry. Been an underwriter for about a year, and I've also now doing the loan processor role. And I do plan to get my mortgage license this year. So I'm just staying dedicated to the mortgage industry. I really enjoy it. And like my brother said, I'm just happy to be here, happy to be able to support my mom and one of many of her endeavors that she has. And yeah, me and Mike, we're 12 years apart, but we do still have a great relationship. So us even having that huge age gap, I'm excited to, speak with, my family and also give insight to people. Just like she said, this being her adult children. We're being 12 years apart, me being almost 26. We have different stages of our lives that my mother helps us with. So we're just here to talk about it and share it with y'all.
Well, let me tell you, there were stages of my life that you guys helped me with. I can openly, honestly say. So as I was really talking to God about this, which is kind of a courageous conversation because, of course, no parent is perfect. Children aren't perfect, but at the bottom of our hearts, we want the best for our kids. And so you guys had the the opportunity to have me at two different stages of my life. So when I had Mike, Michael, you know your own story that I shared, but for the viewers, Michael was premature. He was 3 pounds 3 ounces, and I was 20 years old, and didn't know exactly what to do. I think I knew what not to do, but being a parent at 20 years old, when I look back at my life then, I'm like, oh my God, how God, how did we make it? Being low income, being single, and I'm sure one of my prayers was, God, I don't know what to do if you give me a son. During that time in the late 80s, the community in which I was living in, it was a lot going on. And so as a parent at 20 years old, trying to make it, trying to survive, trying to work, trying to do what's right, a lot of times you make mistakes. I was still kind of traditional, zero tolerance, which could have come off as some kind of tyrant. But one of the things I have to admit at 20, sometimes parenting was, I don't want this to happen to him, and I'm afraid that it could. So help me not make it happen. And so, Mike, as you were being reared, can you just share a little bit about what your experience was like being raised by a single mother?
Yeah. you, you mentioned the term tyrant. That's funny. You know, I would like to say I was I think I was ahead of my time as a little kid. Like that I kind of knew that a lot of the discipline or the things that was happening was because of my behavior. Although I may have thought that my mom was like mean growing up, because I didn't fully understand the environment that we were living in. I didn't fully understand what she was trying to protect me from or shield me from, what she was trying to teach me. Um, and so I just thought like, man, my mother is just nuts, man. What is, but as I got older and I started to really live life, specifically out on my own, all of those things started to come back to light and started to be like, oh wow, man, yeah, my mom was right. And I would often tell her like, man, I remember when you said this or when this happened or when that happened, and you said I should handle it this way. Um, what I will say is that although we had a tough, upbringing together, it was never absent of love. And I think what happens in a lot of situations is that people get the discipline or the crazy parent or the tyrant, as my mother called it, and there's no love involved. And so now you got a bunch of angry people just feeling like, my mother or my father was hell. But I'm saying, there was no love present. And my mother always made sure there was love present. She told me how great my skin was. I could do anything I wanted to do in life. That she would tell me she would rather her take me out and instead of the streets take me out. That I wasn't going to end up, um, like a lot of, the people that we saw in Detroit. And so that was love. But also being a parent now in my 30s is the craziest, most beautiful, outrageous job I've ever had. And so to do that at 20, I don't know how any human being could raise a child at 20 years old. I don't know. And with virtually no help, what I mean, at all. So I take my hat off, and I may not have, liked everything or agreed with everything, but when you don't understand everything, it's easy to feel that way. And I knew that you also were learning and trying to figure out how to be a parent when you were still just really at 20, you're still just a child yourself, trying to figure
Listen,
trying to
I
figure out.
was.
Yeah, so if it was not for my upbringing, um, I wouldn't be where I am today, and I wouldn't have this level of empathy and love and care for people that you have. Also, you kept me involved in church for as long as I can talk or speak or walk. I was always involved in church some kind of way, and that set the foundation for me to how I wanted to, build my life. And I may not have known it then, but now at 37, almost 38, I mean, it's marked my life, and that's how I show up in the world. So even though you was only 20, and them prayers you prayed to God and the scriptures you put on my wall at a young age, they paid off. Even though you may not have known all of the right ways to do something, but you figured it out. You know what I'm saying? And we came through it together. So that's my
Right.
experience.
Well, the thing is, we were growing up together.
Right.
As we call it, going through the trenches
Right.
together. And being afraid or being in an environment that you don't agree with, but yet that's where you come from.
Right.
I think when I did start going to church, because I actually didn't start going till you was about 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And I remember I told him, and he was a little older, viewers, not to go outside. And he went anyway. And when I pulled up home, because now my goal, get your degree before he get a certain age, I'm so full of stress that I remember throwing my shoe and it hit the wall. And God said, now what if that would have been him?
Right.
And in that moment, transformation occurred because God was like, you're not frustrated just because you're a parent. You're frustrated with life.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes our children get the wrath of what all of the things that we are experiencing. And so I'm just trying to bridge the gap tonight between parents and their kids, or adult kids at that, because we also know the home is the foundation for learning how to love yourself, learning how to have relationships. And if a parent is struggling for whatever reason, the kids see it or the kids know it. So Lady J, I was in a different phase of life when I had the honor of having you, because so I was a single parent with Mike for a period of time. Then I got married, and then the Lord blessed me with Justice, who, listen, she was a different child. Like Michael was one way, that you'd be like, okay, he has some behavior problems. Michael and I started praying together every day, because I'm like, Lord, I don't know what to do, but this your child, we gonna pray. Right. Justice was born with her own way of doing stuff, like, and yet still not really understanding, even at 32, going on 33, I wanted to have a relationship with her that I did not have with my mother, which sometimes probably could be overbearing, or still, once again, fear is still present. And learning how to not operate out of fear as a parent, that's something only God can do. And so, Lady J, let us hear it from your perspective. 12 years later, different generation compared to Mike.
Okay, where do I start? So yeah, like we know that it was a 12-year difference. And I mean, I can remember just growing up, just, always just being happy. Like my mom said, I always just did what I knew that I needed to do without really understanding why I was kind of so stern in what I knew I needed to do. I just feel like I always kind of had like a good moral compass. And the older I get, I really understand the true impact of my name being Justice. Because as we know, there's a lot of injustices in the world, and especially, us being Black, we just have a whole different experience. So when it comes to injustices, like I said, it just impacts me a bit differently. And so just growing up, speaking of church, I remember I went to this school called Cornerstone that was on the east side off Nevada, right down the street from Perfecting Church. And I remember growing up, my brother and his friends would get dropped off there, and I'll get dropped off right down the street. And Cornerstone, it was a Christian-based school, so I remember I had what's it called, chapel, where we'll go over certain verses of the week and stuff like that. Then I was a part of the praise team, and I just remember vividly like dancing to Marvin Sapp's "Never Would Have Made It" and things like that. So when you really speak on foundation, like, of course, like I said, growing up, I knew that's what I was doing, but I really didn't understand the true impact me being a part of that at such a young age, because once I left there, I went to Bates Academy on the west side. Whole different experience. And then going to college, that's when I really truly started to develop my own relationship with God, because I remember I was want to say I was like around 8 that I decided to get baptized. But just even still after that, I always knew God was real based on the experiences my mom have had and life changes that she's experienced with him. So going to college, I say all the time, I would have never graduated if it wasn't for me having my own relationship with God. Like, I went to Saginaw Valley State University, and that was a true culture shock for me. I grew up in Detroit public schools, surrounded by, people that look like me, experience stuff like me, have the same type of lives. Fast forward, I go to a school where they think that Malcolm X is a made-up character like the Tooth Fairy. And then also having a Trump store right down the street, it was just a huge culture shock to me, being able to graduate within 4 years and especially still make it through college during COVID, because I knew a lot of people that stopped going to college during that time because they were like, hey, this world is going crazy. I can't sustain being in college right now. Like, I have to work. I have to make money today. I totally understood that. Anybody that made the decisions during that time, I understood. But I know for a fact for me, if I left college during 2020, who knows when I would go back. So I knew I needed to follow through then. And so me graduating college, I'm like, okay, Lord, like, what do I do now? So I really have developed like my own relationship with God, and I'm grateful to have been put in situations where I was surrounded by Christians and people who weren't perfect, but they knew at the end of the day, when it came down to needing help, needing support, they always turned to God. And so I feel like that being my default now, I'm just very grateful, because you can really tell nowadays when people really don't, know God or have a relationship with God. And it just makes dealing with life a whole lot harder, especially in the times that we're dealing with now. We're dealing with people that are different. I'm gonna just leave it at that. So yeah.
So, as you know, when I think about thank you guys for sharing that. But I didn't grow up in church. Actually, it was the Staples family that was going, and Dion, and they were going, and I was really, 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 I was in a horrible relationship, and it was down the street. So I started going. Actually, when I got baptized, the only people who were present was the Staples family, which I will forever be grateful for. But at the same time, learning how to allow God to use you as a parent for your kids is one thing, because as children, y'all just gonna do what we tell you to do, right? And we hope that the lessons that we give creates a foundation for you to be the people or the person or the dreams that you want, that you can get there. But when parents struggle, again, it makes an impact. And when we see you all struggle as adults, we want to jump in and fix it. And a lot of times we can't. We want to, but we can't. And some try, but then there's conflict because you all may not know our full story as to why we're trying to even still make recommendations or guide you in certain directions, even as adults. And parents are now saying, God, we thought it was tough, or we thought we worried when our kids was little. But now being free to the world for parents is even more, it can be even more stressful or worry even more, because we can't govern every step that you take or every decision that you make. So can you offer parents some type of guidance or direction on how do we manage that? Now we know God and we know we have to pray, but how do we communicate, so that you all will understand where we coming from, and then we can understand where you coming from? Because ultimately, as a mother, we just want the best for you. And then even as adults, sometimes we can see things ahead of you,
Yeah.
but because maybe um there is some resentment, or we might need to forgive each other for something, then the adult child just kind of shut us out. And I'm not saying that's what you do, but it can be a huge gap, because now you're adults. And I hear parents say, well, they weren't raised like that. You know what I mean? So what can you say to a parent who has adult children, how to help you when we know you need it and maybe you don't know you need it? What is it? How do we have that conversation, or how do we just fall back?
Yeah, um, I think it's two things that can happen. I think there has to be a good balance of trusting the values and the morals and the things that you instilled in your children to come out into the world when they are living their life. But then two, you do a great thing by offering help even when I don't ask. I think that's helpful because, especially for men, adult men, we don't want to have to ask for help. Like, we don't want to have to say, yeah, it's hard right now, man. Can I get some assistance on this or whatever the thing may be. So I think that's helpful. But two, I think a great thing that can start a great conversation is asking the child, like, hey, I'm not trying to be all in your business or whatever have you, but what does me helping you as an adult look like for you?
That's good.
Like, how can I best, serve you in this situation, or whether it's financially, whether it's they're dealing with marriages or kids or whatever, what does that look like for you so that we can have this conversation in our relationship, and we can be on the same page, so it doesn't feel overbearing, so it doesn't feel like I'm trying to run your life, or it doesn't feel like I don't trust you and all of these things. But I think asking that opens a dialogue of trust. Like, okay, I do trust my mother or my father do trust me because they're asking, what does that help look like? And then, I think that creates a safe space for the conversation to be open. And then once the parent knows that, then you get in when you fit, and I think it's helpful for the child to feel like I do have parents that care. And then if the child is guarded, I think that does help let the guard down. Because for whatever reason, I think with us, especially my generation, if we become guarded or a wall goes up, we get defensive or whatever. That's just a coping mechanism. So I think a great way to sort of weave through that is just asking, what kind of parent do you need during this period? Do you need a parent that's on you about this, or do you need a parent that's more laid back? Do you need a parent that's more vocal about it, or do you need a parent that's letting you figure it out on your own? And then if you fall short, you come back to me. So it's just about knowing what each other needs as adults. You know what I mean? And I think that's helpful.
Yeah, so we have a comment. Leon, he says a lot of adult men don't want help because they think they can solve the problems themselves, but they are your parents. They are there for you in your everyday life always. And that's true. And I think that's the message we want you to know. But Justice, if I can move to you, and Mike, that was a phenomenal response. I remember when you came home from college, and that was an awakening for me, let me tell you. And one of the things she said was, well, Mom, not who I was when I left. You got to get to know me for who I am now. And that was like like if I could cuss, I'm like, that was real. Like, Because guess what? I was not who I was when she left either. And so women, mother and daughter, can be a challenge, a different type of challenge than mother and son, even though that can be a challenge with the daughter. My mama used to say every woman need their own space, point blank, period. So I had to learn how to be quiet. And when I'm thinking I know it all in terms of what she needs, because I know my journey. And one of the things I attempted to do each age she turned was to share my life with her. Because once again, I don't want her to hit the pitfalls that I hit. So, Justice, can you share your bit, your from your perception, your experience of what it looked like, and then being 12 years younger than Mike, and then seeing me when you came back at a very vulnerable space that no one else saw.
Okay, so yeah, I agree with Mike's advice on how parents can adult their how parents can still parent their adult children. But as far as me personally, like you stated, how I said that, you have to get to know me for who I am now, because I don't think people really truly understand my generation of what COVID really did to us. COVID happened in 2020. I was 20 years old. So growing up hearing just, oh, how my 20s should be, I didn't have that. COVID happened and it completely changed the world as we knew it. So my specific generation, our 20s is navigating COVID and life afterwards, versus every other generation before had their 20s to live how they were supposed to live, enjoy life to the fullest. But for us, it's like, okay, yeah, we can still enjoy life, but at the same time, no, we're all experiencing this at the same time of different ages within our lives. And so me coming back home, I remember I came back home during COVID and I'm still doing classes at the scheduled time frame, and then having to go back to college during COVID, and I graduated. It was a lot. So it's just, I needed a new way of parenting from that aspect, because it's like I said, all the ways or all the stories that I've heard, your 20s is for this, this, and this. I don't have that. Like my 20s from 2020 to I want to say about 2023 was COVID and all the crazy world and America stuff that's been happening that, might have been a thing that's happened previously, but maybe not to this magnitude of intenseness. So it's like, I say all that to say, for my generation specifically, is parents need to have the open communication, but also really truly ask about their children's true mental health, because once again, no one's ever experienced what life is currently but my generation in our 20s. Like, we personally feel like us turning 26 this year, we still 23, 24 at heart, because COVID ate up our time of, being outside, enjoying people, but we were on lockdown for a year and a half, and then just, certain more diseases and stuff happening. And COVID was a very, very treacherous time for a lot of people, and I don't think people really truly understand the impact that the people who are in their 20s, like I said, went through. And so after asking about the mental health, it's just essentially just truly having that open communication. I know you said each year that I, got older, you shared open experiences. I feel like parents need to be even more vocal with their adult children on stuff that they went through, whether it was good, bad, ugly, or whatever, so the children can know that, hey, I may be going through stuff like this, but I'm not alone feeling like this. I'm not the only one that have done stuff like this before, because a lot of times children or adult children feel like, because they don't really know their parents' backstory, that they don't know what they're going through. The whole time the parents have gone through what they've gone through worse, but we don't know because we're not being told that. So I feel like the asking on the true mental health, having that open communication, but also just laying it all out there on the table, what they've gone through, to really have a closer connection with the children, just understanding that, hey, if I did this, I learned from this. Obviously, I don't want you to go through this as well, but you can understand that, hey, you can make it through. There's just certain changes that you need to do, whether it's, how you spend your time with people or doing certain stuff. You can still make it through, but not feel like no one knows what you're going through because you don't know what other people have experienced.
I think that's good. But oftentimes, Jay, I hear parents say, adult parents to their adult children that, hey, they don't listen to me. And then I'll hear adult children say, hey, my parents don't listen to me. But I think from my experience, we have these stories of resilience. Like we live without everything. We ate what the mama said eat. If we had one pair of shoes story, that's it. Whereas as parents, we try to give you everything that we didn't have. And I'm not sure if that's always a good idea. Sometimes I think less is more, because what we hear society say now, especially in your generation, Jay, and Mike, the millennials, the resilience factor is not as strong. And then for your generation, Justice, I've never heard so many 20-something-year-olds suffer with anxiety in my entire life. And that could be as a result of COVID. But also, I think the mind is overly activated because of technology, social media, all of these other things that we did not have. And so I think in having these conversations and bridging the gap, I think we have to get to know what's really happening in you guys' generation. And then you all understanding what occurred in our generation so that there's a gap that is built, because both of you have seen me struggle openly, but I'm not sure that in your darkest time that you feel comfortable enough to call me and say, I'm really struggling.
Yeah, I feel like I've done okay with that. Like I'm having a hard time, but there's part of me just based on how I was raised. Like somebody put a comment on there to just figure it out.
Yeah.
And then if it gets so bad, I'll call you or pops or whatever. But I always want to make sure. My biggest thing is not feeling like a failure or I'm letting my parents down. So in my darkest, and then I also know that everybody's going through their own level of darkness, whether it's higher or lower or whatever. And as a 37-year-old man, it's not my parents' job to work through my darkness. It's my job.
Mm-hmm.
So then if there is a moment where I need to tag you or tag Pops in, then I'll do that. But I just, and that's just me personally. I just feel like it's my job. Like that conversation we had a couple of weeks ago, where I was really struggling, and it was a very difficult conversation.
Yeah, that was different.
Yeah, it was a real different conversation, and I had to call you because I just needed some insight. I needed some advice. We had never had that conversation before, and that was a dark moment for me. So that was a moment that I feel like, okay, obviously I can't do this one. Let me reach out and get some insight. But for the most part, you want to take all of the tools that your parents gave you and figure it out. And long as nobody life is in jeopardy. Long as you can still there's food on the table. Long as the light is on. Long as you ain't homeless, things like that. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, I think this life journey, although it's a family affair, it's also a solo journey. Sometimes there are moments of darkness that God have you in for you to figure it out, for you to come out on the other side better. Because you walk through many trials of darkness on your own, which is you and the Lord, and nobody can help you through. Not that you didn't want to help, but I know the story about your mother and father that those were just resources that you just didn't have.
Right.
And so learning that from you, with me growing up that way, I'm not always going to be like, well, I need my mama again. Let me call my mama.
You're right. I get that.
I mean, so let me figure it out because my mother had to, and I watched you. So part of it is like a badge of honor. Hey, I raised my child to figure it out. But then I also know that's a part of you that's like, hey, like Pop said all the time, son, if you need me, you can call me. But I feel like there's this way I was raised that's like, you don't ignore the problem or you don't create false positivity, but you find other ways and means to figure it out. And then if you have no other option, then you, hey mom, hey pops, I'm struggling. You know what I'm saying? So it's not a thing of like, in my darkest hour, I won't call on you or call on pops. But let me see what I got in my tank to work this thing out. Let me see what kind of resources I have. Let me see, what I can work through, because I too battle with my own things that, my own demons, my own struggles that I need to work through, that God is dealing with me with. And then if I have, exhausted everything, then I think that's a moment when you're supposed to reach out. Long as I ain't homeless and long as, what I'm saying, your grandchild is, getting fed and, all the old things are in line. But if we'll be out on the street, you will be getting a call. What I'm saying? It's different.
I think, I guess, because sometimes as adult parents, and we do go through our own thing, and sometimes parents feel not as appreciated. And I'm not here just speaking for myself. I've been working with people for many years. And there are times where, not that a parent should depend on their kids, but there are times where I think adult children need to remember, not even though you didn't add, you wasn't asked to be born, you wasn't asked to be put on earth, but I think sometimes when parents are struggling or when they're going through something, that extra thank you or that, card in the mail or flower or, something, and it helps us to see that even in times where we've made some mistakes in our parenting, that you are still connected.
Yeah.
I saw something, it was a meme where the mother made up the story about getting to not remembering so that her son could just come spend some time. And it wasn't that she wasn't remembering, she just missed her son. And so she created a scenario so that he would feel like he had to be there, when ultimately she just missed him. And I think life is so busy with adult kids, with your parents, that sometimes only on special occasions or holidays or whatever, then we come together, when we have to nurture still the relationship. Because one of my questions is, do you think adult parents can become friends with their adult children?
Friends, there's such a,
Can you be considered as friends?
for me personally, I think there will have to be another name for it.
What name would you give it?
I don't know, because there has to, like, if you never just notice, I still don't curse around you.
Amen.
You know what I mean? Like I don't. So there are certain boundaries that still have to remain in place.
That's true.
When you're around your parents, there are certain boundaries that you just gotta, respect, and certain things that you have to have up. And so I think, can we be friends? I just don't see it that way.
That's right.
Yeah. Same with pops. I don't, there was just certain things, like, because pops don't drink, so I won't have a drink. I won't have a drink in front of him. You know what I mean? Like, so there was just, but a friend I would. You know what I'm saying? So I just think that there has to be a certain boundary and a level of respect that never leaves. But I do think the relationship and communication and the way we spend our time can be can be different.
Mm-hmm.
Like for your birthday here, that felt like we had a ball. We got to, what I'm saying, experience, each other in other ways. But we always do that when we hang out. But I don't be like, oh yeah, my mama, that's my friend. No, my mama, that's my mama. and there were and the reason I keep that like that is because I'm still the guy who, if I go out here and do something crazy, I'm still worried about what my mama would say.
Amen.
Still worried about what my mama would think about that. And I get kind of choked up about that because, it means something to me what my name does out here because of what it means to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like, oh, my mama, that's my friend. You could feel like you could be a little more comfortable whatever you want in the world. And it's all good. That's just, she my homie now. It ain't, and for me, that just don't hit the thing.
I get that. Justice, what do you think? Because I hear adults say, well, my mama was my best friend. My daddy was my best friend. So maybe not friend. But Justice, give me your perspective.
So growing up, me and your mom, we were really, really close. It was just me and you for a long periodically time. And I feel like Mike said, it's not we're friends. I feel like you can have a good, open, honest relationship with your parents that still isn't friend. Because like Mike said, when you put the friend title, you get relaxed. And when you get relaxed, okay, yeah, you might be more open with your parent, but you still might lose certain levels of respect that still needs to be upheld with the parent. And I feel like sometimes, I know you said you're speaking on parents that, feel like they aren't appreciated or their children don't listen to them. I feel like you kind of have to, as the parent, really try to unpack where that's coming from, because I know a lot of times parents can still do everything right for their child, but the child can still end up going down different paths. I feel like as the parent, you kind of have to not try to feel like maybe you didn't like do your best or do all that you can, when it's a lot of other factors, especially adult children. If their child isn't, specifically living under your home, you don't know what they're doing. You don't know who they encounter. You don't know what their daily walk outside of their home is. And I feel like that has a lot to do with why there might be a certain disconnect from the child and the parent. And so, as far as the friend aspect, I agree with Mike. I feel like that can be a slippery slope of, not talking to them with the same level of respect, or, because they're your friend, you might feel like you could do or say whatever in front of them. And it's not a big deal, but at the same time, like, that's your parent. You only have, parents. You could have friends. You could have friends that are older than you that you might be able to have talks with and learn, how they got to where they are in a certain life. But as far as your parents being your friend, it got to be another word or something. I agree.
Well, I get it. It was just a thought, that now that you're adults, but as I'm sitting here listening, it's two areas I want to touch because I know the time goes by really quickly. One, I want to touch blended families because yes, I was a single parent for a period of time. Then I got married when Mike was about 9, and blended families and step parents don't always get the respect or the recognition. And so I can't, even though I'm talking about me as a mother, I also want to mention that I got married and Mike had a stepfather that helped to nurture him, because one of the things I was clear about, I'm a woman, and I never answered to say I'm the woman and the man. No, I'm the woman. I could never be a man. And so he had a stepdad who today he still called Pops at 37 years old, that entered his life to help him in areas that I could not. But for the single mom who did not get married or don't have that person prior to him, at church they had the basketball team. Back then they had the junior deacons, and there has to be some man available to help nurture the young man into manhood. And so I didn't want to talk about parenting like I just rocked this all by myself. I did not. However, for the sake of, since it's my podcast, I'm focusing on me. And so I'm thinking about the word trauma. And I remember when a parent has an awakening, sometimes it's like, wow, I took my kids through this, or I took my kids through that, based upon a parent experiencing trauma. Um, and I think I said to both of you, look, if y'all went through anything because of my craziness, I do apologize. But I also think, and I can stand on that because my life ain't been easy. But I also think it's twofold. Yes, parents should, because trauma sometimes becomes a generational thing. But I believe that in this generation, we have broken the traumatic curses of the past. So that is not continually traveling through our family system. But how do you help adults who may be still carrying resentment of some kind towards a parent who experienced trauma because it just happened? Domestic violence, divorce is traumatic. I mean, our divorce impacted you, Mike, in one way, injustice in another. And a mother oftentimes feel extremely guilty because that's not the story that she had in her head for her kids. And so therefore you have your struggle, the parent have their struggle, and everybody's struggling. So we have here, one of the viewers said that she experienced apologizing to her children also. I think that's a good thing, but for some, it does not preserve the relationship. What would you say to an adult child who is struggling from something that their parent did, rather intentional or unintentional?
Yeah, that's a real one, man. That's a real one. I mean, I took the divorce extremely hard, which was traumatic for me. But I also had to learn that, that the oldest normally do take it harder. I didn't know that. I thought I was experiencing something abnormal. I'm a grown man. It's cool. I ain't even lived in Detroit, but when something like that happens, it's like your entire, it's like your identity is being ripped apart. You know what I mean? And I think what's been helpful for me is finding language for the things that I've dealt with. Language, because if you have language for it, then you can figure it out. Sometimes we're dealing with so many different traumatic things at once that we don't know what they are. And then that's what creates the anxiety, the depression, the suicidal thoughts, the identity crisis, all these different things, because we haven't found language for them. And language is the most important thing. Okay, what am I going through? Like what actually is the thing? And something that's helpful is naming that. Like if your parent, speaking to the adult child, if your parent did something specifically, like in detail, that created some trauma for you, then you have to speak that thing and you have to talk to them about it. As uncomfortable as the conversation may be, you have to get that out because that trauma lives in your body and it affects you physically. Like it actually affects you. It affects your sleep. It affects how you communicate, how you speak to people. It affects how you receive information. It affects how, you deal with, if you have children, your children. It affects how you deal with, your spouse or your lady or whatever. And so I think it's important to find language to identify the trauma. Because me and you had a conversation about, when I had a report card that was, a horrible report card and your reaction to that, and you apologized for it. And I didn't realize that was one of the things that I had been holding on to for years. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until you called, you had a therapy session, and you called and you was like you said, if there's anything that I did when I was raising you that you feel like harmed you or caused you some trauma, whatever, I sincerely apologize. And if you can name it right now, you can tell me. And then that's when a light bulb went off. And I was like, well, hey, one situation, man, was off the chain. Like, and you was like, I remember that. But you explained that I was just so angry. I was going through this, I was going through that. I didn't know what this and that and third. I was, you was in your 20s. You was like, it was just, life was just really hard. Then when I heard that, I was like, wow, I get it. So sometimes I think we as kids, we don't understand what exactly our parents were going through. Now, don't make it right if something occurred, but once you get an understanding, especially as an adult, and you know how hard life is for you, I think that can help bridge the gap. Once I heard it took me back to that time period where I was at while you were working 2 and 3 jobs, you know, while you're trying to take care of me and figure this out and figure that out, still at that time with no help. Once you broke that down to me, I was able to let that go. But I didn't even know it was there, and so I think it's important to identify these things, no matter how difficult it is. Now, ours wasn't like super horrible or crazy to where I was, like that.
Right.
But still, sometimes we don't even know things have caused trauma, and it's not as crazy as we think it is. You know what I'm saying?
Because and like we have a viewer here that says she yelled all the time, but we come from the era of corporate punishment.
Right.
Get the extension cord. If it's too bad, get the extension cord. And then here's another thing. I think what parents struggle with, it feels like power and control. Now I done told you A, B, C, D, and E over and over and over, and you just refuse to do it. And so now as a parent, and this may not be true for many, now I got to show you who the boss.
Right.
Because now it has become, and it should never become, power and control, but it does, because as a parent, I'm feeding you, I'm clothing you, and why can't you just do what I ask you to do? You know what I mean? Not really knowing what a kid may be experiencing. Right. And that's why communication is so key, but it's our job when you're young to try to implement that. But then we were taught children to stay in a child's place.
Right.
What happens in this house, stay in this house. And I ain't got to explain nothing to you because I'm grown, I'm the mother, and you just do what I say.
Right.
And so that's the era we come from. And so there's a gap because that doesn't work in this generation.
Right.
But that's where the gap comes. Hey, you just spare the ride. What is it? Spare the ride, spoil the child, whatever. That don't even mean what we thought it meant. Right. But that's what we use. And so it will seem like abuse to a kid who don't understand that. My mother used to say, now walk past me. Well, I don't want to walk past you because you're going to hit me when I walk past you. You know what I mean? That's crazy. You think I'm going to walk past you and I already know what's about to go down? You know what I mean? So we just come from two different worlds. And so our thing was because I said so. Right. Period. And so Injustice, who never got a whooping, that is amazing because I was a different person.
Right.
And not even knowing if it would work or not, because she was the kid at 7 years old that told me she didn't want to be in the choir and write me a letter. So I was like, if you got the courage to write me a letter at 7 years old, then I got to go a different way.
Right.
And so
that wasn't my way. I was going to act out and go beat somebody up in school if I felt like I needed to say something, which then would make it worse for me.
Right. So I just think I wanted to communicate because it was just heavy on my heart because we all need each other. Back when I was coming up, we have someone said they wrote their mother letters. I wrote my mother letters. When we were coming up, we had the community. We had the other parents on the block that could tell the kids ABC. I can remember us all going in the house at the same time for dinner. We all went in the house when the lights came on. So it was a different culture compared to now. And so some of the things that we may have done, it was based upon our foundation, but it may have been harmful to you. And that's why I think discussing trauma, because trauma is anything that changes the trajectory of who you are and how you view the world.
Right.
And so it was important to bring that up. Go ahead, Justice.
Yeah, I didn't want to forget because I do want to answer your question as far as, I forgot what you said specifically as far as like adult children still uh showing appreciation to the what you said?
Well, showing appreciation, but what do you say to an adult child who still may be resistant
Yeah.
because of something that happened, especially mothers and daughters?
Yeah. Okay, so regarding that, now if it's something that was like truly, truly like traumatizing, because I do understand like there is certain dynamics within parents and children where the parent could have been totally out of line, did something that, is basically unspeakable, but it was so traumatic to the child that they have to adjust how they do communicate with their parents. But outside of that, for me personally, I feel like how I've experienced within like the past 10 years of, death in my family, I feel like I have communicated to God and just let me start it. Like I said, I have experienced death within like the past 10 years, and I just feel like because I've experienced 3 deaths within the past 10 years, it kind of gave me a new perspective on like how short life is. And if it wasn't something that wasn't truly traumatic and detrimental, and I have to, it altered me completely, I feel like just, communicating with God and really understanding what God says and how children need to still communicate and respect their parents. I feel like that is the true solid foundation, because there'll be times where, I probably don't think, okay, I should talk to my parents. Not because, like, I don't want to talk to them, but how we said earlier, you get so caught up in life. But it's like, you can't keep using being so caught up in life as an excuse on why you don't talk to at least your parents, especially if you still have them here. So I feel like just understanding that, hey, because, I've been talking to you and Dad every single day now because of what I've gone through. And it just makes me feel better to know that me talking to y'all every day, whether I'm completely telling y'all how my day was or whatever, but that just opens the communication. So when I am going through stuff, I can explain on that on top of me already telling you like the daily stuff that I go through. So I just really feel like if the child is really having a hard struggle with, communicating with their parents, they need to talk to God about it. Because at the end of the day, we only have one mother and one father. And I know the experience that you told me with your mother and father and Dad, his mother and father, is like, okay, well, that's not my story, thank God. So I know I need to do my best of just making sure I still talk to y'all every single day and just understanding that, just, cherishing y'all, because like I said, we only have one mother and one father. And especially as I get older now, I, like Mike was saying, he doesn't want to feel like, a failure to the parents. When I know I want to make sure that I'm successful in different ways of my life, so you all can be like, wow, like, I really did do a great job of raising my child, but also they feel comfortable keeping me in the loop of their daily life. So
Well, I appreciate it with some comments, a question, how do you gauge when you're needed if the child never says anything? I think that's what we're saying. They said they gotta let you know if they need you. And if not, you ask the question, how can I support you? And what does that look like?
Yeah.
And giving them the space to tell you. Um, and so I what a parent wants, and I want to say this to you guys, it's just that you're happy, that your life is full of the joy that you desire, whatever that is. Because we only have, I was watching Max Steamy
Yeah.
from Baby Listen, and he said, and I know we're going to have some announcements before we go. What he said hit me today. He said, live now. Live now, because we can't do anything about the past and we don't know what the future will bring. And he was talking to his children on the Netflix. And that really, not even knowing that was going to happen before this. And so we have to be intentional about what we're saying, how we spend our time, how we just forgive. And that's every day, because we're not perfect. and continue to work on bridging the gap to get to know each other, because relationships, we just have to keep getting to know each other. I'm not who I was 5 years ago, and vice versa. And
Yeah.
so he said, live now. And whatever that means for you, that's what you do. And I promise that's what I'm trying to do. I said, Lord, I'm quitting that job. That's it. Anything that's interfering with me living now,
Right.
you gotta go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so Latoya has some announcements. I want to thank you for y'all. Just said y'all could have told me, Mom, we not getting on that podcast. Y'all could have said that, but you didn't. And I appreciate just having this conversation. And for everyone who tuned in, I just think this is a conversation that needs to continue in various areas, because it's what we need to do. Communication is the foundation for any relationship. And as life changes, as I get older and finer, uh, you
Mm-hmm.
know, I ain't who I used to be. I'm a little slower, but I'm in God's hands, and his purpose for me has not ended. I'm just really getting started. So my book has come out officially.
Woo!
It's complete.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
took
Yeah.
a lot. And it's short stories of who I am, along with challenging women to become who they need to become. And so, Latanya, will give you that, and then we'll close out.
Thank you. First of all, this was an absolutely excellent conversation. Thank you, Michael McLaughlin, Lady J. The comments are still coming in. My mom has been in the comments. I purposefully tagged my mom and dad
Mm-hmm.
to tune in, because I thought that this would be something that would be great for us to all share on many different levels. Thank you to all of you. This has been amazing. This is the start of a series. I just want to thank Dr. C, as Critical Conversation turned one this month. The network turned one. Thank you, Dr. C, for rolling with me. And we're going to be back tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Reed. He says a fabulous discussion. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Fake New Vision, Shelley's View, all of you. Hi, Kathy B. Ramsey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Join us back here on the network tomorrow night. One of my really good friends, Pastor Jason Smith, is doing a concert at the Aretha Jazz Cafe March 4th. The one I went to a couple years ago was amazing. He's coming and talk about that tomorrow night at 8. I would love for you all to be in the comments and be in the room, because I love good music, live music. He is a minstrel for Christ, but he infuses old school and new school jazz flavor. So I will be with him tomorrow night at 8. Thank you, Christine. Says great conversation. Christy, my daughter, and I tuned in. I
Amen.
loved it. I
Amen.
loved it. But
Thank
that's all
you.
for me. I just wanted to thank you, Dr. C, and thank you to your amazing children for so much insight. Parenting is layered. I can't wait to the next episode because
Yeah, it's a conversation we need to continue. And I
yes.
just, again, is this something you all want to say to the listeners before we go?
Yeah. Thank you for having us, Ma. It means that you value what we have to say. It means that you want to continue to keep our dialogue open, not just with each other, but to inspire others. And yeah, like my sister said, man, you only get one mother and one father, and no matter what, that relationship is a part of your identity. So if there's anything that you need to fix or work through or forgive or communicate, do that, because life is short. And I pray that everybody out there was inspired, encouraged, and empowered. Pick up the phone and call your moms and pops, man.
Amen. Because if I could, I would. And I
Mm-hmm.
want to thank Critical Conversations for rocking with me and all of my waiting to the last minute coming up with stuff for us to do and talk about. Justice, you got something you want to say?
I do want to thank everybody for joining in, because, like I told my mom, I don't think I've ever even seen like this type of conversation with parents and their adult children. And, just be more open with your parents because they are ready to help. So if you kind of are more vocal with them and just what you're going through, they may be able to kind of give you a little bit more insight as the conversation flows versus them trying to tell you, hey, 1 2 3, do this, don't do that, because some children might not be as receptive to that versus if it's just flowing in a conversation. So just working on the open communication and talking to your parents as much as you possibly can.
All right. And thank you, Miss Shelley View, for joining us and giving input. This is Finally I Choose Me, where authenticity meets purpose. You all have a good night and thank you for joining.
All right.